The old cantina was filled with smoke and the sound of different alien voices talking. Zexthery sat at his usual corner table, his forearms moving slowly as he cleaned his weapon. The young soldiers gathered around him like they did every night, waiting for stories about the war. "Tell us about the humans again," said a young Catherian recruit. His green skin was still bright, not scarred like the veterans. "Tell us about their tricks." Zexthery looked up with his 3 eyes and made a sound like laughing, but it was not a happy sound. "Tricks? You call them tricks? I will tell you about Kepler Station. That is where I learned that humans do not fight like anyone else in the galaxy." He put down his weapon and picked up his drink. The liquid was purple and smelled strong. The young soldiers leaned closer. "Kepler Station was supposed to be easy," Zexthery began. "Just a mining station with maybe 200 humans. We had 5 ships and 3,000 warriors. Our commander said we would take it in 1 day. Maybe 2 if the humans were stupid enough to fight back." The alien veteran took a long drink and continued. "The station was run by Commander Jake Mitchell. I learned his name later, after everything went wrong. He had maybe 50 real soldiers, and the rest were miners and engineers. We thought it would be like taking candy from a child." One of the young recruits shifted in his seat. "What happened?" "Everything went wrong from the first minute," Zexthery said. "We came in with our ships in formation, like we always do. Clean lines, proper spacing, ready for a real battle. But the humans did not come out to fight us ship to ship. They just sat there on their station, waiting." The old warrior's voice got quieter. "Our commander tried to talk to them on the radio. He told them to surrender, or we would destroy them." "You know what Commander Mitchell said back?" The recruits shook their heads. "He said, 'Come and try it,' just like that. No fear, no begging, just a challenge." We should have known right then that something was different. Zexthery stood up and walked to the center of the group. His battle scars showed in the dim light of the cantina. "We attacked the docking bays first, like always. Send in the troops, take control, game over. But when our ships got close, the humans started doing things we had never seen before." He paused and looked at each young face. "The station had big machines for cutting up asteroids, right? Huge laser cutters and rock crushers. But the humans were not using them on rocks anymore. They had turned them into weapons." One recruit gasped. "They used mining tools to fight?" "Mining tools, maintenance robots, cargo loaders, everything," Zexthery replied. "Commander Mitchell and his tactical officer Lisa Price had turned the whole station into one big weapon. When our first ship tried to dock, they used a rock crusher to grab it and smash it against the station wall." The young soldiers looked at each other with wide eyes. This was not how space battles were supposed to work. "But that was just the beginning," Zexthery continued. "We sent more ships to different docking ports. But the humans had people waiting for us in every section, not soldiers in uniforms standing in lines. These humans were hiding in air vents, behind cargo boxes, inside maintenance tunnels." He sat back down and leaned forward. "I was in the 3rd wave. My squad made it inside the station, but everything felt wrong. The lights kept going on and off. We could hear voices in the walls, but could not find anyone. Every door we opened led to another empty hallway. Then we heard this voice on the station speakers. It was Lisa Price, the tactical officer. She said, 'Welcome to Kepler Station. Please watch your step.' Right after that, the floor under my squad leader disappeared, just opened up like a mouth and dropped him into the recycling center 20. Floors down." The recruits were completely silent now, hanging on every word. "We tried to follow our training," Zexthery said. "Take the main control room, secure the power center, control the communications. But every time we got close to something important, It would explode or disappear or turn into something else. He took another drink. The power center was protected by mining robots that the humans had reprogrammed. These machines were designed to work in space, cutting rocks in zero gravity. But now they were cutting through our armor like it was paper. The worst part was Sergeant Danny Rogers and his squad. We heard about them on our radio chatter. This human soldier and his team were fighting outside the station, walking on the hull in spacesuits. They had magnetic boots and were moving around the outside like spiders, cutting holes in our ships and throwing grenades through them. One young recruit found his voice. But that is impossible. No one fights in open space like that. Tell that to the 2 cruisers they destroyed. Zexthari replied. Rogers and his people moved like they were born in vacuum. They knew exactly where to hit our ships to cause the most damage. While we were trying to fight inside the station, they were outside, taking apart our fleet piece by piece. The old warrior's 3 eyes looked distant, remembering. After 6 hours, our commander was getting angry. He decided to just destroy the station and be done with it. But when he gave the order to fire the big guns, nothing happened. The humans had somehow taken control of our weapon systems. Lisa. Price came on our radio again. She said, if you want to blow something up, we have some suggestions. Then 3 sections of the station just came apart. Huge chunks of metal and rock flying everywhere. But it was not random. The humans had planned it perfectly. Zexthari stood up again, his voice getting stronger. Those chunks of station hit 2 of our cruisers and damaged a 3rd. The humans had turned their own home into ammunition. They destroyed part of their own station to win the battle. What happened next? Asked a recruit. We ran away, Zexthari said simply. Our commander ordered a full retreat. We had started with 5 ships and 3,000 warriors. We left with 2 ships and maybe 800 survivors. And the humans were still broadcasting messages, asking if we wanted to surrender. The cantina was completely quiet except for the sound of Zexthari finishing his drink. That was my first lesson about humans, he said finally. They do not fight like anyone else. They do not follow the rules. They take whatever they have and make it into something dangerous. Most importantly, they never give up, even when giving up makes sense. He looked around at all the young faces staring at him. Commander Jake Mitchell could have surrendered and saved everyone on that station. Instead, he chose to fight with mining equipment and maintenance robots. And he won. One recruit asked quietly, "Did you ever fight them again?" Zexthari smiled, but it was not a pleasant smile. Oh yes, many more times. And every single time, they taught me something new about war. Something I had never imagined before. He picked up his weapon and started cleaning it again. Tomorrow night, I will tell you about the siege of New Carolina. That is where I learned that humans get stronger when things get hopeless. The young soldiers slowly got up and left, talking quietly among themselves. They would be back tomorrow night, ready for another lesson about the humans who changed how war was fought in the galaxy. Zexthari sat alone at his table, remembering Commander Jake Mitchell and the day a mining station defeated a fleet. The next night, the young soldiers came back to the cantina. They found Zexthari at the same table, but tonight he looked more serious. His 3 eyes stared at the wall for a long time before he spoke. "You want to hear about New Carolina?" he said without looking at them. "That is where I learned that humans become more dangerous when they should be giving up." The recruits sat down quickly. They had been thinking about the mining station story all day. New Carolina was a farming world, Zexthari began. Green fields, small towns, families with children. The humans had been there for maybe 20 years, growing food and building homes. It should have been easy to take. He picked up his drink, but did not taste it yet. We came with a real army this time. 50 ships, 20,000 warriors, siege equipment. Our general said we would have the planet in 1 week. One young recruit leaned forward, but it took longer. 8 months. Zexthery said quietly. 8 months of fighting, and we never really won. The humans taught me that sometimes losing slowly is the same as winning. The old warrior finally took a drink and continued. The human commander was Captain Ryan Bell. His second in command was Major Kate Foster. They had maybe 500 real soldiers and 2,000 civilians. Against our 20,000, he stood up and walked around the table. At first, everything went like it should. We landed our troops, took the spaceport, surrounded the main city. Captain Bell and his people fell back to the mountains where they had built some kind of fort. We thought it was over. Just wait them out, let them get hungry and cold, then they would surrender. But the humans did not think that way. Zexthery stopped walking and looked at the recruits. The first strange thing was their engineer, Tony Adams. When the humans started running out of bullets for their guns, did he ask to surrender? No. He started taking apart farm equipment and making bombs. The young soldiers looked confused. Farm equipment? Tractors, plows, fertilizer spreaders. Anything with metal and electronics, Zexthery explained. Tony Adams would take a machine. That was supposed to plant seeds and turn it into something that could blow up our tanks. He made weapons out of things that were supposed to help plants grow. He sat back down, his forearms moving as he talked. But that was not the strangest part. The strangest part was Dr. Helen Garcia. She was supposed to take care of sick people, right? But when food started running low, she did 2 jobs at the same time. 2 jobs? She would spend the morning treating wounded soldiers, taking bullets out of them, and fixing broken bones. Then she would spend the afternoon in underground rooms, growing vegetables in water and artificial light. She kept people alive and fed them at the same time. Zexthery's voice got softer. I was there when one of our patrols found some of those. Underground gardens. The rooms were full of green plants growing under bright lights. But Dr. Garcia was not just growing food. She was teaching children how to do it too, so the knowledge would not die if she did. One recruit asked, "What happened to the wounded soldiers?" "That is where Lieutenant Sam Tucker comes in," Zexthery replied. This human soldier got his arm cut off by shrapnel from one of our artillery shells. Clean cut, right at the shoulder. Any normal person would go to the medical station and stay there. He paused and looked around the table. Lieutenant Tucker tied a rope around the wound to stop the bleeding. Then he picked up his rifle with his remaining arm and kept fighting for 3 more days. The young soldiers made shocked sounds. This seemed impossible. 3 days? Zexthery repeated. He would not go to Dr. Garcia for treatment until his squad finished their mission. And you know what their mission was? They were supposed to destroy one of our supply convoys. Which they did. Lieutenant Tucker helped blow up our trucks with one arm while bleeding the whole time. The old warrior took another drink. But the real lesson came from Major Kate Foster. After 6 months of fighting, we had the humans completely surrounded. No way in, no way out. No more supplies, no more reinforcements. Any reasonable commander would surrender. He leaned forward. Major Foster sent a message to our general. We thought it would be surrender terms. Instead, she said, "You have 1 chance to leave this planet before I get creative." That was all. Just a warning. Our general laughed. What could she do? She was trapped with maybe 200 people left. No heavy weapons, running out of food. But we had learned to be afraid when humans said they were going to get creative. Zexthery stood up again, pacing around the table. 3 days later, we found out what she meant. The humans had been digging tunnels under our main camp, not with proper mining equipment, but with kitchen knives and cooking pots and pieces of broken metal. They came up through the floor of our command center at night. 50 humans with homemade weapons and explosives made from cleaning chemicals. They destroyed our communications, our maps, our supply lists, everything important. One recruit gasped. They attacked your main base? Not just attacked. They left a note on the general's desk. It said, "This was just to show you we can reach you anywhere. Next time we will not be so polite." Then they disappeared back into their tunnels. Zexthery sat down heavily. That was when I understood something important about humans. They do not fight just to win. They fight because giving up is not part of how they think. What happened next? Asked a young soldier. Our general tried one final assault. Everything we had left, all at once, to end it quickly. But when we got to the human fort, we found something that still gives me bad dreams. The recruits waited quietly. The humans had turned their children into soldiers too. Not to fight. They were too young for that. But the children were carrying messages, bringing water to fighters, watching for our troops, and reporting what they saw. Zexthery's 3 eyes looked sad. 8-year-old humans crawling through air vents to spy on us. 10-year-old humans running across battlefields to deliver ammunition. They had made their whole families into an army. The final attack failed. We lost 300 warriors trying to take a fort defended by people who should have been dead from hunger and exhaustion. But the humans just would not stop. He finished his drink. Then our reinforcements arrived and broke the siege. But Major Foster sent one last message to our general before we left the planet. What did she say? She said, "Thank you for teaching us how much we can survive. We will remember this lesson." And then she offered to help treat our wounded soldiers before we left. The cantina was very quiet. The recruits were trying to understand what they had heard. That is the second lesson about humans, Zexthery said finally. When everything is hopeless and any normal person would quit, humans find a way to become stronger. They take desperation and turn it into determination. He looked around at all the young faces. We thought we were teaching them about defeat. Instead, they were teaching us about what it means to never give up. A recruit asked quietly, "Did Major Foster survive the war?" Zexthery smiled, and this time it was not sad. She became a general later. I met her during the peace negotiations. She still remembered my unit number from the siege, and she still offered to help treat our wounded. The young soldiers began to leave, talking softly among themselves about humans who turned farm equipment into weapons and fought with kitchen knives. Zexthery remained at his table, remembering 8 months on a farming world where he learned that some people simply refuse to be defeated, no matter what happens to them. The third night brought more young soldiers to hear Zexthery's stories. Word was spreading through the alien military about the old veteran who had fought the humans and lived to tell about it. Tonight, even some officers came to listen. Zexthery noticed the crowd but said nothing about it. He just started talking like always. "Tonight I will tell you about Omega-7, he said, cleaning his weapon slowly. That was a research station where I learned that human scientists can be more dangerous than human soldiers. The recruits and officers settled in to listen. Outside, rain was falling on the metal roof of the cantina. Omega-7 was not a military base, Zexthery continued. It was a place where humans studied space, gravity, and other science things. Maybe 300 people worked there, and most of them had never held a weapon in their lives. He put down his weapon and picked up his drink. We thought it would be the easiest target of the whole war. Just surround the station, wait a few days, and the scientists would surrender. What could they do? Throw books at us? One young officer laughed, but Zexthery did not smile. The station was run by Dr. Alex Morgan and engineer Beth Clark. When we told them to surrender, Dr. Morgan got on the radio and said something very strange. He said, "We need 2 weeks to finish our current experiments. Then we will talk." 2 weeks? Asked a recruit. 2 weeks, Zexthery repeated. Our commander thought the humans were crazy. But we had plenty of time, so we decided to wait and see what would happen. That was our first mistake. The old warrior stood up and walked to the window, watching. The rain. For the first week, nothing happened. The humans stayed in their station. We stayed in our ships. Sometimes we could see lights in their windows, like they were working late into the night. Then strange things started happening to our ships. Small things at first. Navigation computers would give wrong directions. Communication systems would play music instead of carrying messages. Food storage units would heat up and spoil. Our supplies. He turned back to the group. We thought it was just equipment breaking down. Space is hard on machines. But then engineer Beth Clark sent us a message. She said, "Sorry about the technical problems. We are still learning how your systems work." The officers looked at each other with concern. This was not how research stations were supposed to behave. That was when we realized the humans had somehow gotten into our computer systems, Zexthery said. Beth Clark had taken their science computers and turned them into weapons that could attack through radio signals. He sat back down at his table. But that was just the beginning. Dr. Morgan and his team had been studying gravity, trying to understand how it works in space. But when we surrounded them, they started using their gravity machines for something else. What did they do? Asked an officer. They created invisible hands that could crush our ships, Zexthery replied. I was on the bridge when it happened. One moment we were flying normally. The next moment it felt like a giant was squeezing our hull. Metal was bending, windows were cracking, and we could not see what was attacking us. The young soldiers listened with wide eyes as he continued. 3 of our ships were destroyed by gravity weapons that we could not even see. The humans had learned how to make space itself fight against us. But the worst part was what happened to our captured equipment. Every time we lost a ship, the humans would somehow get pieces of it, and then they would make those pieces work better than when we had them. Zexthery took a long drink. There was a young human named Nick Potter, barely old enough to be a soldier. He was just a helper in the laboratories. But this kid took our energy weapons and made them 30% more powerful in just 2 weeks. How is that possible? Asked a recruit. I asked the same question when I was captured later, Zexthery said. Nick Potter told me that human science is different from everyone else's science. He said, we do not just want to understand how things work. We want to make them work better. The old warrior's 3 eyes looked distant. While we were trying to figure out how to fight gravity weapons, the humans were already working on their next surprise. The station's security chief was Officer Gary Stone. His job was to protect the scientists, but he had a problem. None of them knew how to fight. So what did he do? He taught them to use their science knowledge as weapons, Zexthery replied. The physics experts became snipers because they could calculate exactly where bullets would go. The chemistry people made sleeping gas from plants they found on nearby asteroids. The biology team created medicines that would make our soldiers too sick to fight, but not sick enough to die. He stood up again, pacing around the crowded table. Every day, the humans got more dangerous. Not because they were getting more weapons, but because they were getting smarter about using what they had. The turning point came when Dr. Rachel Ford figured out how to make their whole station disappear. Not actually disappear, but invisible. To our sensors. One day we were watching the station through our telescopes. The next day it was gone. The officers leaned forward. This was information they needed to report to their commanders. We spent 3 days shooting at empty space. Wow. The humans escaped in small ships they had built from spare parts. Not built properly in factories, but put together in their laboratories using pieces of broken equipment. Zexthery sat down and looked around at all the faces watching him. When we finally figured out what had happened, we found something in the station that scared us more than any weapon. What was it? Plans, he said simply. The humans had drawn up plans for 50 different kinds of new weapons, all using science we did not understand. And they had left copies of these plans where they knew we would find them. The cantina was completely silent except for the sound of rain on the roof. Dr. Morgan had left a note with the plans. It said, "These are the weapons we chose not to build. Please think carefully about whether you want to continue this war." One officer asked quietly, "What kind of weapons?" "Things that could make stars explode. Things that could turn planets into dust. Things that could make time move backwards in small areas," Zexthery replied. And at the bottom of each plan, there was a note saying, "This would be wrong to use. So we will not build it." He finished his drink and set the glass down carefully. That was my third lesson about humans. They do not just solve problems. They solve problems they have not even thought of yet, and they do it faster than anyone else in the galaxy. But they also choose not to use the most terrible weapons they can think of. They could have destroyed our whole fleet with some of those plans. Instead, they just scared us into leaving. A young recruit asked, "Did you ever see any of those scientists again?" Zexthery nodded. Dr. Alex Morgan became the head of the Human Science Council after the war. He helped design the peace treaty, and you know what he did first? The group waited. He shared some of his research with us. Not the weapon plans, but the good science. Ways to grow food better, ways to heal diseases, ways to travel faster between stars. He said knowledge should help everyone, not just the people who discover it. The officers and recruits began to leave, talking quietly about gravity weapons and disappearing space stations. But several officers stayed behind to ask Zexthery more questions about human science capabilities. The old warrior answered what he could, but he always ended with the same warning. The most dangerous thing about human scientists is not what they build. It is how fast they learn to build new things, and how they choose to use what they build. As the cantina emptied, Zexthery sat alone, remembering a research station where humans had turned curiosity into the most powerful weapon of all. The fourth night brought the biggest crowd yet to hear Zexthery's stories. Word had spread to other cantinas, other bases, even other worlds. Aliens who had never fought humans came to listen. Some had traveled for days just to hear these tales. Zexthery looked at all the faces around him. Young and old, different species, different ranks. Tonight felt different. Tonight he would tell them about something more important than tactics or weapons. "Tonight I will tell you about Sergeant Chris Taylor and the Battle of Crimson Mesa," he began slowly. "That is where I learned the most important thing about humans. They know how to make enemies into brothers." The crowd grew quiet. This was not what they expected to hear. "Crimson Mesa happened late in the war," Zexthery continued. "By then, some of us aliens had started fighting alongside the humans instead of against them. I was one of those aliens." A young recruit looked confused. "You fought with the humans?" "Yes," Zexthery said simply. "Because I learned that humans do not just defeat their enemies. They turn them into friends. But I will explain how that happened." He stood up and walked around the packed room. Everyone made space for him to move. "My unit had been captured after a battle on the moon Titan V. We expected to be killed or put in prison camps. That is what happens when you lose a war. But the humans did something different." "What did they do?" "They asked us if we wanted to keep fighting," Zexthery replied. "Not against them. With them. Against the Catherian commanders who had sent us to die in hopeless battles. The old warrior stopped walking and looked directly at several officers in the crowd. Sergeant Chris Taylor was the human who talked to us. He said, "Your leaders treat you like tools to be broken. We treat our people like family to be protected. You can choose which way you want to live. Many of us chose to fight with the humans. That is how I ended up in Sergeant Taylor's squad for the Battle of Crimson Mesa." Zexthery sat back down but kept talking. The squad was mixed. 3 humans, 2 Catherians like me, 1 Zephyrian, and 1 Mantid. 7 different beings who had been trying to kill each other just months before. How did that work? Asked an officer. At first, it did not work well, Zexthery admitted. We did not trust each other. The humans Corporal Amy Davis and Private Ben Murphy would watch us aliens carefully. We aliens would stick together and avoid the humans. Everyone was suspicious. But Sergeant Taylor would not let us stay divided. He made us work together on everything. When it was time to eat, we all ate together. When it was time to clean weapons, we cleaned each other's weapons. When someone was sick, everyone helped take care of them. The crowd listened carefully. This was a side of war they had never heard about. The first real test came when we were sent to scout enemy positions on Crimson Mesa. It was supposed to be a quiet mission. Just look and report back. But we walked into an ambush. Zexthery's 3 eyes looked sad as he remembered. I got hit by plasma fire in the first few seconds. Burns on my back and 2 of my arms. I was down, could not move, could not fight. In the old army, I would have been left behind. But Corporal Amy Davis and Private Ben Murphy did something that changed everything for me. They carried me to safety while enemy fire was all around us. 2 humans risking their lives for an alien who used to be their enemy. The room was completely silent now. Rain had stopped outside, and the only sound was Zexthery's voice. While they were helping me, Amy Davis got shot in the leg. Ben Murphy took shrapnel in his shoulder. But they did not leave me behind. They kept dragging me to cover while bleeding from their own wounds. Why did they do that? Asked a young recruit. I asked Amy Davis that same question later. Zexthery replied. She said, "Because you are part of our squad now. We do not leave squad members behind, no matter what species they are." The old warrior picked up his drink, but did not taste it yet. That battle lasted for 6 hours. Our squad was cut off from the main force, outnumbered 3-1. But something amazing happened. We stopped thinking of ourselves as humans and aliens. We became just soldiers helping soldiers. The Zephyrian. In our squad, his name was Crix. He was the best shot with a rifle. He covered us while we moved to better positions. The Mantid, called Sharp Cutter, could climb walls and attack from above. We humans and Catherians provided heavy fire and medical help. Zexthery finally took a drink. For the first time in my life, I was fighting as part of a real team. Not just following orders, but working with people who cared if I lived or it happened next. Captain Lisa Wright arrived with reinforcements, but not before we lost Private Kevin Price. He was one of the humans in our squad, barely. 20 years old. There was a Catherian war machine heading straight for our position. Someone had to get close enough to destroy it with explosives. The old warrior's voice got very quiet. Kevin Price volunteered. He said, "I can get there faster than anyone else." We all knew it was probably a death mission, but someone had to do it. He made it to the war machine and planted his explosives. But he could not get away in time. The blast killed him instantly, but it saved the rest of us. Zexthery looked around at all the faces watching him. You know what his last words were over the radio? He said, "Tell my mom I was brave, and make sure Zexthery gets home to see his family." Several aliens in the crowd made soft sounds of sadness or surprise. A human boy who had never met my family, who did not even know what planet I came from, used his last breath to worry about me getting home safely. That is when I understood something important about humans. They do not see other species as different kinds of creatures. They see us as people who happen to look different. An officer asked, "What happened to the rest of your squad?" "We stayed together for the rest of the war," Sexthery replied. Amy Davis and Ben Murphy both got promoted. Crix became a sniper instructor. Sharp Cutter joined the human engineering course. We all survived because we learned to trust each other completely. But the most important thing happened after the war ended. Captain Lisa Wright, who had commanded the human forces during that battle, did something that no military leader in galactic history had ever done before. The crowd waited expectantly. She invited former enemy soldiers to join the new peacekeeping force, not as prisoners or second-class troops, but as equals. Cytherian officers working alongside human officers. Zephyrian pilots flying with human pilots. All of us working together to make sure the galaxy stayed peaceful. Zexthery stood up one more time. I spent 30 years in the Cytherian military before I met humans. In all that time, I never had a single friend among my fellow soldiers. We were just tools for fighting. But in 6 months with Sergeant Taylor's squad, I found a family. People who cared about me not because I was useful, but because I was part of their group. He looked directly at the young recruits in the crowd. That is the fourth lesson about humans. They do not just win wars. They win hearts. They take enemies and turn them into brothers. They make strangers into family. And that is why they are the most dangerous warriors in the galaxy. Not because of their weapons or their tactics, but because they can make anyone want to fight beside them instead of against them. The crowd began to break up, but many aliens stayed behind to talk to each other about what they had heard. Former enemies working together as equals was an idea that challenged everything they thought they knew about war. Zexthery remained at his table, thinking about Sergeant Chris Taylor and a young human named Kevin Price, who had worried about an alien's family with his dying breath. Tomorrow night, he would tell them about the final battle, the one where humans showed that victory without honor was no victory at all. A fifth night was different from all the others. The cantina was so crowded that people stood outside in the street to listen through the windows. Generals and admirals sat next to young recruits. Reporters from news services across the galaxy had come to record what the old veteran had to say. Zexthery looked at the massive crowd and felt tired. These were the last stories he would tell about the war. After tonight, people would have to learn their own lessons about humans. "Tonight I will tell you about the last battle," he said in a voice that carried to every corner of the packed room. "The defense of Earth. That is where I learned that humans know the difference between winning a war and building a peace." The crowd was so quiet that everyone could hear the sound of breathing. By the end of the war, the Cytherian Empire was losing badly. We had been pushed back to our home systems. But our high command decided to make one final attack. If we could destroy Earth, the human home world, maybe we could force them to negotiate. Zexthery stood up slowly. His old battle wounds made moving painful, but tonight he needed to stand for this story. It was the biggest fleet in galactic history. Every ship we had left, every soldier who could still fight. 2 million warriors, 10,000 ships, enough firepower to crack a planet in half. He looked around at all the faces watching him. I was there as part of Admiral John Parker's defense force. By then, I had been fighting with the humans for 2 years. Earth was my home too. The humans knew we were coming. They had plenty of time to prepare. But what they prepared was not what anyone expected. An officer in the crowd called out, "What did they do?" "They turned their entire solar system into a fortress," Zexthery replied. Not just Earth, but every moon, every asteroid, every space station. Admiral Parker and General Susan Cole had organized the biggest military operation anyone had ever seen. But here is the thing that amazed me. It was not just soldiers defending Earth. Every human helped somehow. Factory workers built weapons. Farmers grew food for the troops. Children delivered messages. Old people watched for enemy scouts. The old warrior walked through the crowd as he talked. People moved aside to let him pass. I remember a teenager named Jimmy Carter who worked in the subway tunnels under New York City. His job was to watch for enemy soldiers who might try to attack from underground. Just a kid with a radio, but he was part of the defense of his planet. When our fleet arrived, we found something that scared us more than any weapon. We found humans who were completely ready to fight for everything they loved. Zexthery stopped, walking, and looked up at the ceiling. The battle lasted for 3 days. Space around Earth was so full of ships and explosions that you could not see the stars. Both sides lost thousands of soldiers every hour. But on the second day, something happened that changed everything. A group of Cytherian soldiers managed to land on Earth's surface. They took human civilians as prisoners, including children. The crowd made angry sounds. Taking civilians prisoner was considered dishonorable by most alien cultures. General Cole could have ordered an attack to free the prisoners, but that might have gotten them killed. Instead, she sent Colonel Mike Roberts to talk to the Cytherian commander. What did he say? Colonel Roberts offered to trade himself for the civilians, Zexthery replied. 1 human officer for 20 innocent people. The Cytherian commander agreed because he thought having a high-ranking prisoner would be useful. But here is what the Cytherian commander did not understand about humans. When they care about someone, they will do anything to protect them. While Colonel Roberts was talking to keep the commander distracted, a rescue team was already moving into position. The old warrior sat down on a table in the middle of the crowd so everyone could see him. The rescue was led by Lieutenant Sarah Johnson and Sergeant Paul Martinez. They got all the civilians out safely and captured most of the Cytherian soldiers. But they also did something else. They made sure the captured Cytherians were not hurt. Why would they do that? Because humans understand something that the rest of us did not, Zexthery explained. They knew that how you treat your enemies during a war decides what kind of peace you will have after the war. The battle ended on the 3rd day when our high command realized we could not win. Too many ships destroyed, too many soldiers lost, and the humans were still fighting just as hard as when we started. Zexthery's 3 eyes looked sad. Our Supreme Admiral sent a message to Admiral Parker. He said, "We surrender unconditionally. We await your terms for our punishment." The cantina was so quiet that people outside could hear what was being said inside. Admiral Parker's response changed galactic history. He said, "There will be no punishment. There will be justice, and there will be healing, and there will be peace. But there will be no revenge." Several aliens in the crowd made sounds of surprise. This was not how wars usually ended. The surrender ceremony happened on a space station near Earth. I was there as part of Admiral Parker's staff. When the Cytherian High Command arrived, they expected to be executed or imprisoned for life. Instead, General Cole offered them chairs at the negotiation table. She said, "We are here to end this war in a way that makes sure it never happens again. That means all of us have to work together." Zexthery stood up again, his voice getting stronger. The peace talks lasted for 6 months. Humans and Cytherians and Zephyrians and Mantids, all working together to figure out how to share the galaxy without fighting. But the most important moment came when the talks were almost finished. The Cytherian Supreme Admiral asked Admiral Parker why the humans had not demanded revenge for all the destruction we had caused. What did he say? Admiral Parker said, because revenge creates more enemies. Forgiveness creates friends. We would rather have friends than dead enemies. The old warrior looked around at the packed cantina. That is how the Galactic Peace Accord was born. Not from fear or defeat, but from humans who understood that real victory means making sure the fighting stops forever. The first thing the new government did was create mixed military units, with humans and aliens serving together as equals. The second thing was to start sharing technology and knowledge between all species. A third thing was to make sure that everyone who had been hurt by the war got help to rebuild their lives. Zex Theory walked back to his original table and picked up his drink. I spent the next 10 years working for the Peace Accord. Humans and aliens together, making sure conflicts got solved with words instead of weapons. And you know what I learned in those 10 years? Humans are just as good at building peace as they are at winning wars. Maybe better. A young recruit called out, "What happened to all the human commanders?" Admiral Parker became the first director of Galactic Peace. General Cole started the Interspecies Medical Corps. Colonel Roberts founded schools where young aliens and humans learned together. They all lived to see their children grow up in a galaxy where different species work together instead of fighting each other. The crowd began to break up slowly, people talking quietly about what they had heard. But many stayed behind, asking Zex Theory questions about the peace negotiations and what happened after the war. Finally, only one young Catherian recruit was left. He approached Zex Theory's table nervously. "Sir," the recruit said, "I want to join the Peace Corps like you did. How do I learn to think like humans do?" Zex Theory looked at the young soldier for a long time. Then he smiled, and it was the first truly happy smile anyone had seen from him in 5 nights. You start by remembering that everyone you meet, no matter what species they are, wants the same basic things: safety for their families, food on their tables, and hope that tomorrow will be better than today. Humans figured out that if you help other people get what they want, they will help. You get what you want. It is that simple and that complicated. The young recruit nodded seriously and walked away, thinking about families and food and hope. Zex Theory sat alone in the empty cantina, remembering Admiral Parker and General Cole and all the humans who had taught him that the strongest weapon in the galaxy was the decision to turn enemies into friends. Outside, the first light of dawn was beginning to show. The war stories were finished. Now it was time for the peace stories to begin.